Today is part 2 of our 9-part webinar series. The title of today is Preparing for Coaching Cycle 1, which is the Teacher Self-Reflection Cycle. Our webinar series is sponsored by CIBME and the Principal Center. So we have some folks who are joining us in the chat, letting us know they can see us and hear us. Ready to go? I like to hear that. So we're going to give folks just another minute to get started, logged in, and make sure they can see us and hear us. Still looking forward to hearing from you in the chat. Letting us know where you're from is also fun for us. While we're waiting for that to happen, I am going to talk to you a little bit about what CIBME is. So, CIBME is an acronym that stands for Seeing is Believing Me. And I want to talk about some of the ways that we can use CIBME. First of all, we're a technology platform for coaching and collaboration. And what that means is that we've created an easy-to-use workflow that enables you to record, to upload, to share videos and resources, and to provide timestamp feedback all in one easy-to-use platform. In addition, we're a professional service provider. We've realized that having the technology alone isn't going to guarantee your success. So we've become experts at the implementation of that technology as you're using it to power your coaching and collaboration work. And finally, we're a virtual coaching provider. We realize that every school doesn't have the bandwidth, doesn't have the manpower to have coaches for their teachers. So we have a virtual coaching, we are a virtual coaching provider, and we have coaches from all over the country who work within our coaching services. And Dr. Guree is going to talk a little bit more about those in just a minute. As we're getting started, we'd also like to hear from you in the chat. We're interested in knowing if you joined us for our first webinar on June the 30th. Were you with us on June 30th? Let us know. And for those of you who weren't with us on June 30th, we're going to do a little bit of background building and a little bit of review of the major objectives of that day. Those of you who were with us, it'll be a nice review for you as well. If you weren't with us on webinar 1, I want you to know that we are showing you the link to that webinar so you can access that webinar. We really do encourage you to watch it if you haven't had the chance. It's really the foundation. It's really the fundamentals of getting started with video. Such important information from webinar 1. So please be sure you make note of the link to that webinar. Once again, today's webinar is titled Preparing for Coaching Cycle 1, Teacher Self-Reflection. We are recording today's webinar, and those of you who are registered will receive a link to that. We are attending to the chat today. If you ask questions that are related to CIBME, we'll have a CIBME representative answering those. And if you're asking questions that are related to the content, we will have Dr. Guree respond to those. We'll be stopping every once in a while to check in on the chat to see if there's anything that anyone has questions about. So as we look at the chat, we're seeing a lot of new folks today, folks who weren't able to join us on June 30th. And that's okay. We're going to give you some background for today. So we are a 9-part webinar series. We are in part 2 of that webinar series today. I do want to give you the big picture about that webinar so that you have a really good understanding of what our purpose is. This series is intended for principals and school leaders who intend to implement video coaching in their schools in the 2017-2018 school year using the CIBME platform. Each webinar in our series is designed to show principals and school leaders how to complete the work that they will need to attend to in the month that follows the webinar. Ultimately, Dr. Guree will share the process that she uses to ensure that every teacher in her building participates in a minimum of 3 coaching cycles. Coaching cycle 1, which is the cycle we're going to talk about today, is for teacher self-reflection. Coaching cycle 2 consists of coaching teachers with teacher-generated goals, and coaching cycle 3 is dealing with coaches working with teachers in coaching coaches-generated goals. So my name is Allison Burnett, and I am the Director of Professional Learning and Virtual Coaching for SIBME. In addition to that, I work as an adjunct professor at a local university where I work with students in the urban education department who are on the pathway to becoming teachers. It's my pleasure to be the facilitator for today's webinar as we learn from the expertise and knowledge of Dr. Goree. And I want to introduce her to you and say a little bit about her before I have her add a few details. So as you can see from the caption, Dr. Goree was the Cy-Fair, and that's Cypress Fairbanks Elementary Principal of the Year in 2015-2016. Over 26 years in education and educational leadership. And in addition to that, I do want to tell you that Dr. Goree is recently back from the Principals Conference in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I think that's the city of murals, as I recall. And you presented a session there titled Seeing It Clearly, Videotaping for Self-Reflection and Instructional Coaching. Dr. Goree, can you tell me just an estimate, how many folks do you think attended your session there in Philadelphia?
I think roughly 100, maybe a little bit more than 100 people participated in that session. A great crowd, lots of questions, lots of interest in the video coaching process. Lots of leaders coach. That's what we do as instructional leaders, we coach. But adding that video, adding that additional layer of video was quite intriguing to the people in the audience. They were interested in how to elevate their coaching process using video enhanced coaching.
That's great. Thanks, Dr. Goree. So now I'm going to ask you to go ahead and give a little bit more of an introduction about yourself, and then we're going to get started with our webinar.
Oh, absolutely. Good morning to everyone, and I'm glad to see that we have new participants as well as some veteran people who were part of that first webinar joining us today. As you can see on the screen, I do have 26 or so years in education, but 15 as an administrator. And I'm going into my 8th year as a building principal. I was the principal at a previous campus for 5 years, and this will start my 3rd year at my current campus. And using this video enhanced coaching process was a part of both of those campuses, as I shared in the first webinar, and both campuses have experienced success with the use of the camera, video coaching, should I say. And we will continue to use this process as long as I am the principal of the building, because it does work for improving classroom practices.
Thank you, Dr. So let's take a look back at webinar number 1. For those of you who weren't with us, this is going to be just really important foundational information for you. Those of you who were with us, it's a great review as well. And so we talked about basically 3 objectives in webinar 1. Dr. Goree, would you take us back through those bullets of the objectives from webinar 1?
Well, in webinar 1, we talked about assessing and building your school's culture. That's your why, finding your why, determining why video enhanced coaching is needed in your building or with your staff. Building the capacity of your leadership team. Remember, this is essential because it is very important that coaches are on the same page and that you are coaching with the same end in mind, that everyone is aligned. Preparing for that infomercial, that's your one shot to get it right. Making sure that you don't miss that opportunity to introduce this to the staff and get the buy-in from the staff. Making sure that you're answering all the questions that will come from introducing something new, and doing it with fidelity so that everyone is on board with the process once you roll out video coaching.
Thanks for that review. And now I want to take us to polling question A, our first polling question of our webinar today. We do like to get our participants involved. We like to know a little bit about what you're thinking and what you're doing around the work of these webinars. So the first polling question is, what assignment was most valuable to you as you prepare for implement video enhanced coaching this year? So if you will, please just let us know. Was it most valuable for you to learn about the importance of creating the infomercial? As Dr. Goree says, that's that one shot you have to really roll this out to the faculty and anticipate all of their questions. Was it reading the shared resources? I know that Dr. Goree mentioned two really important resources in webinar one, Dr. Jim Knight's book, Focus on Teaching, and then the Building Teachers' Capacity for Success book was another resource that she mentioned, all helping to calibrate your leadership in this process of coaching. Was it actually calibrating the coaches, whether we're reading the same content or we're practicing watching videos and deciding what needs to be commented on? Was that the most important piece of homework that Dr. Goree gave you? Was it completing that culture check where you were deciding if you had the culture in place to actually use the video coaching process? So did we have transparency within our culture? Do we have a culture that's focused on continuous improvement? And then Dr. Goree, as homework, asked you to assess your bandwidth for coaching. How many people do you have on your campus, whether it's administrators or instructional coaches, who really can be part of this process? And do you have enough bandwidth to pull that off? And if you don't, she's talked a little bit about some alternatives for you. All is not lost. There's still hope and great things in front of you. And so she talked about that as well. So let's take a moment, let that poll populate, just another 20 seconds or so, and then I'm going to have Dr. Goree talk with you about what she sees there in those polling results. I do want to mention, Dr. Goree, I have to tell you that on my reading list was one of the resources you mentioned last time, the coach approach to school leadership. And I have not gotten to it yet, but I am traveling to Atlanta at the end of the week, and it is going to definitely be on the plane with me, and I'm fingers crossed to get to it. All right, let's go ahead and end the poll, and let's take a look at our results. Dr. Goree, I'm going to have you do some processing for us of what you see there.
I don't see the poll right now. I got it. Okay, well, it's about an even split with creating the infomercial and assessing your bandwidth. The reading resource, everything on that we are polling is absolutely important. So I can understand why the split looks the way that it does. Completing the culture check is equally as important, although it wasn't the most valuable of our participants that are here. But everything that's listed there works together in order to create a coaching environment, to create this as part of the norms and routines on your campus. So very interesting to see that.
Yeah. Thank you. All right, so what we'd like to do next is just to talk a little bit, again, going back to webinar one, talk a little bit about some of the data. And one specific piece of data was academic gains for the 2015-2016 school year at Dr. Goree's school. And this is another view of that data. Dr. Goree, would you help us to understand what we're looking at here?
You're looking at the collective results of our 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade state data. And collectively, we did make gains as an entire campus, and individual grade levels made gains as well. We do anticipate the same result this year, that everyone will make gains. Every content area will make growth collectively based on our preliminary data that we've received. We do expect to have gains in every content area again this school year.
That's great. And we do know that in October, Dr. Goree is going to be able to officially release some of her data. So we're looking forward to the October webinar to seeing that data from Dr. Goree. So we're hoping you're going to join us on that webinar. So that brings us to today's objectives. We have 3 objectives for today. Dr. Goree is going to talk about the value and importance of coaching with video as opposed to coaching without video. She's going to talk with us also, very importantly, about the plan and process for coaching cycle 1. And this is where we're going to spend quite a bit of time, that teacher self-reflection cycle and the importance of that. And then I'm going to take that 3rd bullet, the way Sydney's platform helps to power a school's self-reflection cycle, and take you through into the platform and show you some of the whistles and bells as they relate to the teacher self-reflection piece that we're working on today. So objective 1, the value and importance of coaching with video. Dr. Guri, what can you tell us about what you can accomplish with video that you cannot accomplish without it?
Well, just as I mentioned earlier, just by nature, building leaders are instructional coaches, but adding video to that takes you to that next level. Video enhanced coaching is indisputable. Having the recording builds credibility between the coach and the teacher. It validates the coach's perspective, and it's a way to have accountability on both sides, on both the teacher and the coach's side. It's not built on a recollection of facts that are scripted in the classroom. When you walk into the classroom with notes and you're scripting things, and then you come back to offer some feedback, you may have to think back on, oh, did this happen? Did I script this correctly? Well, video eliminates that. It is based on actual facts that are recorded on the video. When used objectively, it helps the teacher opens up to feedback. It's because it's not biased. It's a non-biased opinion. It is definitely a way to help teachers with that growth mindset. It develops that mindset because it is a way to normalize conversation. When in the CIVI platform, when coaches provide feedback, it's time-stamped. A teacher can go to that timestamp, click on it, read the feedback, and actually watch the video at the same time. So that helps with validating the coach's perspective, and helps with that growth mindset that we want all of our teachers to have. It also helps teachers to see their strengths and the areas that they need to improve in. It is where perception meets reality. Are those things that I believe happened in the lesson, did they actually happen? Well, using video allows you to verify that those things really did happen or did not happen, and allows the teacher to be reflective on those practices.
So I'm going to have to remember that phrase, where perception meets reality.
Where perception meets reality.
Thanks for sharing that. So that was great to hear the value of coaching with video versus coaching without. And that takes us to polling question B. We want to be, again, very interactive with you as you're helping us to understand your thinking along the way. And so polling question B, we're going to post here for you to see, and then ask you to begin to respond. So Dr. Guri gave us a lot of reasons there, the value of coaching with video versus coaching without video. And of all the reasons that she shared for coaching with video, which do you see as being the most important? So was it for you that video evidence is indisputable, unlike perhaps our memory or our recollection of something that happens, or maybe even our incomplete notes of what happened? Is it because using video helps to support a growth mindset? When we use video, it's just much more clear that we're really about pushing our growth. We're very serious about it. Is it when used objectively, video helps teachers to be open to coaching? Was that one of the reasons that you found most compelling? Or video helps teachers to see their strengths and areas that need to improve? Of all the reasons she shared for coaching with video, which do you see as being the most important? We'll take another 5 or 10 seconds to let the poll develop. We have a little over half of those who are with us today who've already responded to the poll. All right, let's go ahead and end and publish the poll. Dr. Guri, can you see the polling results?
Yes, I can. Video helps teachers to see their strengths, and that is absolutely true, in their areas of need. And that's what we're going to talk about today in the self-reflection piece. It is the first step for them to be able to see that. Using video helps support a growth mindset, and that's where we want our teachers to be. That is absolutely correct. Video evidence is indisputable. Only 4% chose that. I actually think they're equally important, so it would be difficult for me to choose one over the other, but I definitely I definitely value the opinions here. And if you had a choice to choose more than one, I think we would be equal because all of them are important for using video.
Thank you. All right, so we're going to leave the polling question behind. And we're going to now say this. We've talked about the value of coaching with video. And you're probably joining us today because you either are doing it, trying to do it, or intrigued about doing it. You've committed it in some way, shape, or form. This is something you want to do in the 2017-2018 school year, and that's why you're joining us. That's why you're part of our audience. But not everyone has the bandwidth to provide coaching for every single teacher on a campus. And so I'm going to ask Dr. Goree, while coaching with video is important, we know that not all schools can work with all teachers to do that. So what are some options for those leaders who see the value of coaching with video but don't have the bandwidth to do it?
Well, I certainly believe that every teacher of record should receive coaching. Partial implementation doesn't have the same favorable impact as full implementation does. You want it to be a part of your culture, you want it to be a norm in your building, then everyone needs to experience video coaching. So if you are unable to provide coaching because you don't have the bandwidth, you don't have enough coaches for the number of staff members that need to participate in the coaching process, SIDME does offer a coaching service, a virtual coaching service, where there are highly qualified coaches from all over the country that will work with your teachers on a 6-week cycle. This is highly focused on objectives, and it's a hybrid model where there is face-to-face via Zoom or Skype, along with conversations about the recordings that the teachers have filmed and related to their goals. And weekly coaching reports are provided for the teachers and the administrator. I highly recommend that every teacher on your staff participates in this coaching process. Starting off with a small group and then trying to grow to a larger group has not yielded the same type of results. From some of my colleagues who have shared that they've used that process are now going full out. I'm using video coaching with every teacher on staff. So if you are struggling with your bandwidth, there is help through the services provided by SIDME.
Thank you. Very nice. So that takes us to objective 2 of today's webinar. And this is really the meat and potatoes of our work here today. And it's around the goals and structures of coaching cycle 1 is the teacher self-reflection cycle. So Dr. Goree, I'm just going to ask you to just share with us in depth and detail what this coaching cycle consists of for coaching cycle 1.
Well, coaching cycle 1, and you can quote me on this, self-reflection is one of the greatest forms of professional growth. You can definitely quote me on that. So this is where in coaching cycle 1, teachers are allowed to videotape themselves privately. And we give them a reflective form that we'll share in a little bit that they use after they've recorded themselves. But it's where perception meets reality, what we talked about a little bit earlier. During this cycle, you get an opportunity to get rid of all your jitters. You know, what do I sound like? What do I look like on video? I will tell you, what you hear is not what I hear. I do not sound like this. When I go back and watch my self-reflection videos, my voice, it always sounds different from what I actually hear. But you get past that, and that's what teachers are allowed to do. Get past those jitters. They also can take a look at the norms and routines in their classroom. What do your transitions look like? What's your environment look like? Is it conducive for all the things that you want to accomplish in your classroom? But more than that, more than just those things, this is the opportunity for them to verify very specific things. You know, do I favor one side of the classroom over the other? Are my questions at the level that they should be? Are my students responding the way that I want them to? All of those things that we believe happen during the self-reflection process, teachers get to verify that they're actually happening. We require every teacher to do cycle 1. It's private, as I said before. We don't look at cycle 1. They don't have to share it with us, shall I say. But because the SIGME platform has analytics, I can go into the SIGME analytics. I can look and see if the teacher actually recorded their video and posted it. I can't see the video itself. And we do tell them that cycle 1, the self-reflection cycle, is private. But I can determine if it was actually posted, because I can look at the analytics and look at when it was posted, date, time, those types of things. But getting back to the self-reflection piece, Allison's going to talk more about the analytics in Objective 3, as she mentioned earlier. But getting back to the self-reflection piece, I encourage everyone to allow teachers to do this cycle first. Use the reflective questions as the guide. And if you need to personalize them for your campus, then do so. But it helps teachers, you kind of shape and mold their thinking about the reflective process as it relates to what you want to accomplish as a campus. It aligns with, if you think about it, those are the self-reflection piece of this, it aligns with the appraisal systems now, because the new appraisal system in Texas, as well as I'm sure the other systems across the states, when looking for the answer to what tool can you systematically use to help teachers focus on continuous self-directive improvements for classroom practices, self-reflection does that. And it allows teachers to get a jump start on what that process looks like. So that's how we use self-reflection. It is very important to the growth process. If you can't see that something's wrong, you definitely can't fix it. But through the guided questions and through the whole cycle 1 process, teachers self-correct a lot of things before we get to cycle 2, which is when they sit down with the coach. They've already self-corrected a lot of things and are ready to talk about the goal that they want to work on with their coach.
And so, Dr. Goree, we're posting here for folks to see just some, in a sense, a broad stroke of the self-reflection questions, and based on really Bloom's taxonomy here. And
Yes.
we are going to be able to share more specifically the guiding questions that you use on your campus with folks, and they'll have access to those specific questions as well. So what you're saying then is we're not letting teachers, or not asking teachers to be self-reflective about any old thing. It's going to have to be related to something around instruction.
It has to be related to what you are trying to accomplish as a campus. What's your instructional focus as a campus? What are your instructional guarantees? What are the things that you guarantee will happen in the classroom every day? That's where your self-reflective questions should be guided around. What needs to change or improve instructionally on your campus? That's how you shape and create your reflective questions so that they are purposeful. You don't want random selection. You want it to be purposeful. Everything, remember when we talked about video coaching before, and doing your infomercial, it's all purposeful. So the self-reflection questions are purposeful. The purpose is to accomplish the goal for your campus, the instructional goals for your campus.
Very good. And before we move on to the timeline, just to say that I just have a premonition that something about reflective questions is going to be in their homework for this webinar. I don't know if that's going to be true or not, but I think so. So Dr. Goree, here's the coaching timeline that you follow for implementation. Could you talk to us a little bit about that?
So we, as I mentioned in the last webinar, we start at the very beginning. When I joined this staff 2 years ago, they had not been introduced to video coaching. I introduced it with the staff on the very first day we were together. I introduced it to the staff. I used my one shot, and I used it well because they all bought into the reason why we needed to do it. They understood that it was understood that we needed to change our culture and do some things to improve instruction in the classroom. And so my infomercial went over well, it's well received. And we started our coaching process in August. So the first day of school, they can record themselves for self-reflection on the very first day of school through the end of September. That's the self-reflection cycle. The second cycle is when they meet with a coach for a pre-video conference, and to actually, the video is recorded and feedback is provided, which we'll talk about more in webinar 3. That happens October through November. And then the last cycle is December through February, and that's where the coach is leading the goals based on our relationship with the teacher and being in the classroom often and things of that nature. Then the coach can generate some goals that we want to see. At this point, December through February, things should be going really well instructionally because the teacher has been coached and they've done self-reflection, and there's been multiple classroom visits, so things should be going pretty well. If by chance there's someone who's still struggling with meeting those instructional guarantees, or those those instructional practices that we want to see in the classroom are not happening consistently, we continue the coaching process, which is what we call heavy coaching. We continue on after February until the teacher reaches those instructional goals that we have set forward.
I know you've told me in the past that after February, while you do heavy coaching with teachers who still need some assistance and guidance, and I thought it was really cool that you also have some teachers who organically have just gotten used to being coached and who continue to share videos and continue to seek input and feedback.
Because of the relationship that's developed through this process, because of the trust that's there, teachers will take a snapshot of a small group lesson, and of course they upload it, and I'm in the huddle with them, and I'll get a message that says a video has been uploaded. Then the teacher follows up with, hey, I wanted you to take a look at a small group lesson I did today and provide some feedback. Because that relationship is there, because they trust the process, because they know it's 100% for growth and it's not an evaluation tool, that we do use this coaching process for teacher growth, and they want to continue to grow. So something that we may have talked about in our first free video conference, they may have perfected it or put a twist or spin on it, and they want us to take another look at it. So that happens throughout the entire year. It doesn't end. Our coaching doesn't end with these 3 cycles. It continues on all throughout the year, most often led by the teacher, sending those videos or posting those videos and wanting a little more feedback, or saying, hey, I did something else with my questioning today. Can you tell me what you think? And that happens more often than not.
Mm-hmm. So Dr. Goree, then just for me to do a little summarizing, and then we're going to ask folks to post some questions in the chat regarding coaching cycle 1, the self-reflection cycle. But as I look at the calendar and as I was listening to you talk, it looks like your teachers have about 5 weeks in the self-reflection cycle. And I'm guessing then there's that's a window of time during which they're going to have to produce at least one video that's going to make it into their workspace. And there's as you have said in the past, what you inspect, you're going to expect, and we're going to use analytics to do that. So within that 5 weeks, the goal is the teacher produces one self-reflective video, and that video should be related in some way to the guiding questions or our instructional guarantees.
That is correct. And can I also say that during the self-reflection, since we are talking about cycle 1, teachers, they only have to record one video. But when I look at the analytics, sometimes there's 3 videos in there, because they'll record something, they'll reflect over it using those reflective questions, and then they'll go back and record themselves again. So they are self-guided, self-correcting, making those adjustments to their instruction. And every time they make an adjustment to instruction, the students benefit. So self-reflection just offers multiple bonuses that you can't plan for, that teachers who go through this process will see and make changes and adjustments automatically.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. So let's go ahead and now, not as a polling question, but just asking folks to participate in the chat with us. What questions do you have about the self-reflection cycle? What else do you need to know? What haven't we answered that is important for you to understand so that you can begin planning for not only the self-reflection cycle, but perhaps those additional coaching cycles as well? So if you'll just start populating some of those questions in the chat, and we'll start reading those aloud and having Dr. Goree, our expert on this, who's going to share her wisdom, her advice, her knowledge with you. And as we're waiting for some of those questions in the chat, I just wanted to make a comment that for me, that workspace is a rehearsal space, and it sounds like that's how some of your teachers are using it as well.
Yes.
I learned in high school band the importance of rehearsal. And it seems to me like that the more we rehearse something, the better we tend to do with it. So that workspace is a place for self-reflection and self-rehearsal as we're trying to get better at our craft. So there's some questions coming up in the chat. Dr. Goree, I'm just going to read some of these to you and ask you to give us some responses. From Wilson, what kind of video recording equipment do you use to get a good picture of the classroom and the sound that goes with it?
Well, the Sydney platform is a web-based platform, and we use our Apple devices in order to record the classroom. And Allison, will you share some of those details when you get to Objective 3? So Allison will share some of those details about the platform and the recording device. So we use, it's for any iOS or Android device. We use Apple devices to record, and the sound is amazing. The recording is amazing. It's very clear. It uploads. It's web-based, so it uploads in a matter of seconds. We used to use flip cameras, and I will tell you, sometimes it would take 24 hours for the videos to upload. But now that we've switched over to the Sydney platform, it has simplified the entire process.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things we do is we post some information about different pieces of equipment in the chat for folks. So if they're looking for the kind of video equipment that might enhance, but as Dr. Goree said, when we record with our own devices, our BYOD, we brought our own device, we're recording with our own device in the Sydney app, we're going to have some pretty good results in terms of an easy to use results as well. Another question comes from Jamie. She says, is the self-reflection aligned to a specific evaluation tool or instrument? I know you said that it's for coaching, not evaluation, but is it aligned to a specific tool, Dr. Goree?
The self-reflection is just part of our 3 cycles for video coaching. It's not aligned to any tool. We created the self-reflection questions by searching the web, thinking about our campus, personalizing those questions for the needs of our staff. The only alignment is to the video coaching process. It is cycle 1 of the entire process we use for video coaching. We start with self-reflection because it is so powerful, and it does allow teachers to be prepared for cycle 2 when they sit down with a coach. I believe that if the first step was sitting down with a coach, they'd be more apprehensive. But through self-reflection, they get the opportunity to do all those things that we talked about earlier. Look at themselves, look at their practices, evaluate their questioning, all of those things that they do in a classroom anyway, but they get to do it on video and see if it's actually happening. So it's not any form of evaluation. It is just part of our the 3 parts of our coaching cycle.
So you see it's being formative and not summative.
Yes.
Okay. Mary Kelly is asking, what do you do when you have a few teachers who have very specific things to work on, but it may not be something all teachers need to work on?
In a previous webinar, we talked about, I think webinar 1 for sure, we mentioned it, and one of the previous webinars prior to that, all teachers have room for growth. Video coaching is for master teachers. It keeps you from being complacent. It's for those teachers who are just really solid. It takes them to the next level. It's obvious why it's good for teachers that struggle, because they are able to look at their practices. It's not limited to a struggling teacher. I don't have a campus full of struggling teachers. I have some very solid teachers, but I will tell you who is the first to say, oh my gosh, when I did my self-reflection, I noticed that I do ABC. It's my rock solid teachers, because they are the ones who want to be, the best. They take pride in their practice. So it is not just a struggling teacher tool. It is every teacher tool. Everyone has room to grow. My entire administrative team, even the coaches, are required to videotape themselves and self-reflect. They videotape planning sessions. I videotape staff meetings. If an administrator or a coach goes in to model a lesson, we set up the camera or the iPad to videotape ourselves and do the self-reflection piece. So it's not a growth tool for struggling teachers. It's a growth tool for everyone.
Mm-hmm. Very good, Dr. Morris. It's not a deficit approach. It's all teachers are going to be coached, all teachers can grow. And I think that comes back to that culture you created of a continuous growth mindset. Good enough isn't good enough is one way of putting it. So again, that's just part of the culture that you've created. So I think we've tackled all the questions that we had in the chat. Some folks are talking about the Danielson framework and how this would be great to use with that as well, and that's very appropriate as well. And we do have one more question. Would you use this video for pre-conferencing? So would you use the CIMI platform and in terms of pre-conferencing with teachers?
Pre-conferencing for assessment, for formal assessment? Is that the question? I'll answer that. Absolutely. It has multiple it has multiple benefits. So yes, if that trusting relationship from the coaching is there, you can use it in other ways. Now, we do not cross coach and evaluator on purpose because I don't ever want a teacher. That's one of the things that we guarantee them. This will not be used for evaluation. So your coach and your evaluator are two totally different people, because I don't want teachers to ever think that anything they're being coached on will come up later in their evaluation. If they are coached well, if your coaches are calibrated, if the coaching process works well on your campus, then when it comes to the teacher evaluation, everything goes well because they've had that coaching, or they've had, the self-reflection and then those 2 cycles of coaching to help them improve their practices.
Thank
you.
you.
You could use it that way if the relationship is established properly.
Very nice. So we're going to go ahead and hit objective number 3. I'm going to take the reins on this a little bit, but Dr. Gorey, I want you to ask questions along the way or add anything if I forget to say something that's really important to you as an administrator using this platform. And objective 3 is tackling how the CIMI platform powers the self-reflection cycle. So I'm going to talk about just a couple of things in terms of the platform that maybe doesn't relate exactly to self-reflection, but that you need to understand. And then I'll try to restrict my comments to be very specific to using the platform for the self-reflection process. I also want to say that I'm going to share some information with you in just a minute at the end of our webinar today. So if you're interested in getting a bigger picture of the CIMI platform, we do free demonstrations. They're typically an hour long, and I typically do those. So if you'd like to have more information about, see the full platform and all of its whistles and bells, you can set up a time to do a demonstration as well. But for now, we're going to be very specific in looking at parts of the platform related to self-reflection. So what you're seeing right now is a screenshot of my dashboard view, and a dashboard is really like the dashboard of a car, and that is there's lots of instrumentation here, and there's some things I want to talk about as we move forward and help you understand better how this platform helps fuel and power folks like Dr. Gorey with the self-reflection coaching cycle. So as you look at my dashboard, the 2 things I'm going to really contrast a little bit here are our workspace and our huddles, and then I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about workspace and analytics as we move through this 3rd objective. So it's important to talk about my workspace, which is a space for private self-reflection and really intentionally designed for the self-reflection process of self-coaching here. But before I do that, I want to talk about something in our platform called huddles. And huddles are spaces, just like in a football game, the team huddles up to share information. And huddles are spaces on our platform where folks are sharing information with one another, videos and resources. There's really 2 types of huddles I want to talk about as relate specifically to our K through 12 friends today, and that is a coaching huddle and a collaboration huddle. I'm going to just mention those briefly to contrast that with our workspace, and I want you to know that when we get to webinar 3, Dr. Gorey is going to be talking more about our huddle spaces, and that's when it's going to be more appropriate for me to go into depth there. But just as contrast for you, the huddle spaces, coaching and collaboration, those are for more than one person. The workspace is there for us as individuals. So huddle spaces, coaching spaces there for coaches and a teacher who are sharing videos and who are sharing resources and who are getting timestamp feedback. Collaboration huddles are there for peers who are collaborating together, whether it's 2 peers or 22 peers. And so in our collaboration huddles, those are spaces for maybe teams or PLCs. Maybe you have committees on your campus like a discipline management committee or a literacy committee, where it's important for folks to share videos of strategies that they're teaching or resources of directions of strategies. All that's there for us in our huddle spaces. But today, our focus is on our workspace, and that's the space on the platform for private self-reflection that goes along so nicely with what Dr. Goree is talking about in coaching cycle number 1, the cycle for self-reflection. So let me take you into my workspace so that you'll have a better understanding. So my workspace, by default, if I'm recording from within the Sydney app, my videos are going to go directly to my workspace on the Sydney platform. And they'll be stored on the Sydney servers, and that workspace is there for me. I just look at it as really a warehouse or a storehouse for my videos, and that helps me to have that psychological safety Jim Knight talks about and Dr. Goree has talked about. When you talk about asking teachers to videotape themselves for growth, Dr. Goree, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's not usually a long line of people with their hands up saying, please let me go first.
That is correct.
So we have to really attend to the psychological safety that we need when we're talking about video, and that happens in our private workspace. No one else can access the videos in our workspace, although using analytics, the account owner and super admin have the ability to look to see that we have in fact put videos in our workspace, and I'll talk about that more in just a minute. But as I said earlier, for me, the workspace is that place for rehearsal. It's where I'm videotaping myself, and my videos are being stored in this private space on the Sydney cloud that no one else has access to. And it gives me the opportunity to watch myself teach in a way I know nobody else is going to see this. It's okay to take a risk here, and it's okay to leave my comfort zone. No one else is going to see this. In that workspace, I'm going to get used to hearing myself and seeing myself on video, which lends itself to that psychological safety. Just to take it a step further, for me, I think it's important to have our teachers maybe make some recordings that are non-instructional in nature, especially at first. Maybe asking them to record a video that's a 360 of their classroom, where they're just holding the camera, walking around the room, talking about the design of the room, talking about the intentionality of where they have work centers set up and so forth. Again, just give them some time to get used to seeing themselves and hearing themselves on video before we ask them to start looking at themselves for instructional purposes. So that then, if I were to open any one of these thumbnails up, let me take you to the view that I would see once again in my workspace. So you're looking at one of those thumbnail videos. I've opened that up. I'm in my workspace, and you can see here I am. That's me, Allison Burnett, getting ready to hand out some stuff to my participants. And here's the value of my workspace really for me is I can view that video, and not only view that video, but I can make notes to myself based on that video. I'm going to talk about some of those whistles and bells in a second, and no one else can see this. This is my private space for self-reflection. I'm going to make a football analogy here to Peyton Manning. When Peyton Manning was about to retire, they did a documentary on him, and they followed him around that last season. I think he was playing for the Broncos. I'm sure somebody will correct me if I'm wrong. And wow, that documentary was so impressive to me because it kept showing shots. It was late in the evening. It'd be like 11 o'clock at night, and Peyton Manning is in the room watching game films. There's hardly anybody else in the office, but Peyton Manning's in there watching game films, and he's watching his footwork, and he's watching to see how all of his mechanics of his throwing and so forth. Here's a guy about to retire. He's been doing this for a long time. He's super successful. He's won Super Bowls. Yet he's looking at his game tapes because he knows he can get better. But the one thing I really want to focus on here is that when Peyton Manning was in there looking at those game tapes, he had a notebook and he had a pen and he was taking notes. And he looked at the camera at one point and he says, there's no point looking at game films if you're not going to take notes about what you're seeing. So one of the things I love about our workspace is that it allows us to make timestamp feedback to ourselves, timestamp comments and notes to ourselves. So I'm going to be like Peyton Manning. I'm not just watching my game film. I'm making notes to myself as I'm watching that game film. I have to force myself sometimes because we're a really reflective practitioner. We want to make negative comments all the time. We have to force ourselves to find the positives. And so I'm taking those notes, and those notes are time-stamped, time-specific. As we say at SIBI, making every moment a teachable moment. And so if you can see this timeline, you're going to see some red lines along those timelines. Those correspond to the timestamp feedback. At that very moment in time, here's what I was thinking about as I was watching my teaching practices. And one of our newest features we're excited about is I can also make those time-specific comments, and I can actually, and I know it's really hard to see here, but I can actually attach a document in association with what was happening at that very moment in time. So in 2 months from now, as I go back to look at that game film, I can see, oh, I was handing out, this is the document I was handing out at that very moment. So it's a great way of keeping track of the handouts I've given my students. So I can make notes, I can add attachments, I can make those attachments time specific as well. All part of the process of self-growth. But now I want to take you into that analytics view. Dr. Gori talked about this earlier when she was talking about inspecting what you're expecting. If I'm going to give my teachers 5 weeks to complete coaching cycle 1, where that private self-reflection, I still need to know that that happened. So in analytics, I'm just showing you a very specific view in our analytics called user summary. And there's lots of other spaces I'll take you to on webinar 2 and webinar 3, as Dr. Gori is talking about coaching. But for self-coaching and self-reflection, one thing that's going to be important for account owners and super admins to look at is to say, okay, I gave you 5 weeks to record that video. Let me see if there's evidence that there's a video in your workspace. Over here, our names of our teachers would populate. I've covered that up because I didn't think that any of my students would like their names displayed here, but I can look in that column to see that yes, a video has been recorded, or as Dr. Gori says, multiple videos have been recorded, because it's kind of hard to record just once. We're always trying to get improvement and get better. Another thing I want to show you here is we're unofficially calling this the playing card. So the account owner, in this case, Dr. Gori, this is a brand new feature on our platform. She could choose for the first time to enable this and allow her teachers who are users within her account, they can see what we're calling their playing card. And there's more the things that they can see in terms of their analytics, but as it relates to self-reflection, this would be what's most important. Just like a baseball player has a baseball card and they can see their stats and they can see their data, teachers within the platform, if the account owner enables it, can see their playing card. And here we're just looking at some engagement data. How many huddles am I involved in? How many videos have I uploaded? How many hours of videos have I viewed? And there's more data to come when we talk about the coaching cycle. But that gives you an overview of some of the analytics and some of the places on the platform that are related specifically to self-coaching and self-reflection. So Dr. Gori, I want us to talk about what's coming up in webinar 2, which is the coaching cycle, the teacher-driven goals. Is there anything we need to attend to here in the chat before we move on? Let's see here. I think that we're taking care of that from our CIVME folks. So we're going to go ahead and talk about what's happening in webinar 3. That webinar is scheduled for September the 14th at 11 o'clock Central Standard Time. Dr. Gori, will you tell us what we have to look forward in webinar 2 and webinar 3?
Webinar 3 is going to talk about, in that webinar, we will discuss what the first coaching cycle looks like between the coach and the teacher. We're talking about the pre-video conference, what that looks like, why we do it, when you actually go into the classroom to record, what that looks like, huddles, inviting into the huddles, the feedback that coaches give teachers and the responses that the teachers give the coach, how that looks in the huddle and what the benefits are of having that. And then my favorite thing on the CIVME platform, the timestamp comments. I mean, I love the huddles and because you can put the timestamp comments in the huddle, but when using the old version and you'd have to rewind and try to record a time and then write notes about it, and the teacher had to rewind and try to go back and find that moment, the timestamp comments eliminates all of that. And that is really one of my favorite features of this platform, because you click on that timestamp, as I said before, a video goes directly to that moment. You're looking at the feedback provided and you're watching the events that the feedback relate to. So we're going to talk about that also. And then I will give a preview of coaching cycle, the third coaching cycle, the last coaching cycle, when the goals are driven by the coach. We'll talk about how goals are generated, because goals are different for every teacher. They're personalized. And then we also do a post-video conference. That is something that we value here on our campus, because teachers want face-to-face time. And so we do that post-video conference. And actually, because of all the communication that happens through the timestamp comments and the feedback provided, when you get to the post-video conference, it's just a matter of, celebrating, the things that went well, or talking about, hey, what are we going to do next time, or how many more times can I come in and see, what happened, or how much growth or change or improvement has taken place. So those are the things that we'll talk about in webinar 3, what cycle 2 looks like for that coaching process between when there's that personal coach going into the classroom.
Very nice. So let's go ahead. This is I think your favorite part. You're going to assign some homework for folks to do in the month of August. Why don't you tell them about it?
Well, the reflective questions, you want to guide your teachers through self-reflection to be purposeful. Everything has to be purposeful and has to be related to your why. So think about your reflective questions. You can use the ones that we use here, tweak them, but personalize them for what you need to happen with instruction on your campus. Create that timeline for your 3 cycles. When will they start self-reflection? If your infomercial is ready to go, then your teacher should be ready to start that cycle 1 self-reflection cycle. They should be ready to start that in August. If you introduce it with fidelity, if you use your one-shot well, continue working on your infomercial if you're not there yet, because it needs to be the best presentation ever. Calibrate your coaches. If your coaches are not aligned, then the coaching process is not successful. And make sure you have those instructional guarantees so that when you go into the classroom, when your coaches go into the classroom, that you are definitely taking a look at those instructional guarantees through that coach's lens. Something that's not listed here is make sure you assess your bandwidth as well. Remember, coaching should be for every teacher, not just for a select group. In order to implement with fidelity, everyone needs to receive it. It's not just for remediation. It is for growth for the best teacher, the second best teacher, those teachers that struggle. It's for everyone. So take a look at your bandwidth. And if you cannot accommodate your bandwidth, I would encourage you to look at the services that are provided by Sydney.
Thank you, Dr. Goree. And for those who weren't on webinar 1, would you just give us a general description when you talk about instructional guarantees? Would you just give us just a definition of that?
Instructional guarantees are the things that you guarantee. They should be posted in your building for parents to see. Your teachers should know them. Everyone should know them. These are things that you guarantee will happen in your classrooms every single day. Will students use academic language? Will there be critical writing in every classroom? Will small group instruction take place in every classroom? What do you guarantee in every single classroom? It's not specific to a content. It's specific to good instructional practices on your campus.
Thank you. So before we have a few more things to say before we end, but we do want to pause for a moment for questions. If you have any questions that are lingering, please post those in the chat. And we're going to attend to those. So we're going to give you a chance to post those questions in the chat. While you're posting those questions, I do want to encourage you, if you haven't yet signed up for SIBME, we do want to encourage you to sign up. We're offering a free 60-day trial to folks who are on our webinar series. We also want to say that we have provided free content and content to anyone who wanted to register for webinars 1 and 2, but because, as you can see from today's webinar, the content is really becoming very, very tightly aligned, not only to Dr. Goree's process, but to how she uses specifically SIBME during that process. It just really makes sense for webinar 3 that you really need to be either a member of Justin Bader's Pro membership in Principal Center, or you need to be a current adapter of the SIBME platform. So we're going to be limiting registration to folks who are in one of those 2 groups. This is a tool that Dr. Goree is talking about that is very specific to SIBME. And so again, everything that we do from this point on is really going to be a lot more focused on the SIBME platform, as well as the process that Dr. Goree talks about. So we have a couple of things here, a couple of questions. Can this be used for coaches who are in multiple schools? So it is offered to the school through the coach and not the other way around.
Instead of, I'm not understanding the question.
I'm going to look at that question one more time, and as I do, let's see here. So the question is, can this be used for coaches who are in multiple schools? So I'm guessing that means maybe it's a district where they're sharing coaches between buildings, let's say as an example. And I know in some of my instances, the social studies coach got shared a lot. And so maybe that coach is at multiple buildings. So is it offered to the school through the coach and not the other way around? And we're a very flexible platform. Contact us and we can talk to you about how we could set that up to make sense within your program, within your plan, and within your process. The next question that I want to deal with is this recorded? I had to join and I missed the first part. Yes, it's recorded. We'll be sharing that link with you, and we'll be sharing the guided questions that Dr. Goree has shared with us, as well as an overview of webinar 2 as well. All those things will be shared with you in addition. Please do feel free to contact us. You can visit our website. You can ask us for information. You can request a demonstration so that you can understand more about the platform. And then in our final, as we get ready to say goodbye for our final chat, what content in today's webinar most resonated with you? What content did Dr. Goree discuss with you today that most resonated with you as you're preparing to roll out coaching in the 2017-2018 school year? If you'll participate in the chat for us, we would love to know what resonated with you. So Dr. Goree, I'm seeing one for Jamie Lynn. She said, what resonated with her is coaching is for everyone.
It is. It is definitely for everyone.
Yep, when we see coaching as a deficit model, only for those teachers who are new or struggling, it has a whole different point of view. Whenever someone who's been teaching for a very, very long time is coached, in addition to that new or that struggling teacher, it's not a deficit model. We can all improve. And I go back to that, good enough isn't good enough. So when an experienced teacher comes and says, well, I can see how new and struggling teachers could use this coaching stuff, but I don't really think it's for me, we have to have a response to that.
And experienced teachers are the ones who have not looked at their practices through a reflective lens as often. Our new teachers, that's part of their teacher training in most places. So the experienced teachers get just as much, if not more, out of this process than our brand new teachers. That if you take away anything, that is definitely for everyone, and that self-reflection is the most important step to start with.
Very nice. So we have some other chats. Perception. They're quoting you, Dr. Goree. It's where perception meets reality. So I knew that was going to be a quotable quote. Ellen is saying, make reflective questions purposeful to work towards district and building instructional goals. So again, we're not just recording ourselves to recording ourselves. It's very purposeful in nature, and those guiding questions, reflective questions, can give the teachers guidance. Kate says the importance of the self-reflection coaching cycle that will really help ease teachers into the process and relieve some of their fear and anxiety. This Sharnice is saying, I wish I had this when I was supervising many teachers who felt they had arrived. I've worked with a lot of those teachers. Let's see, we have a respondent, Rhonda, saying it helped me to separate evaluation from coaching and the true purpose and benefits of working to improve. One band, one sound. Okay, Rhonda, I know you were in the band too, thank you. We have CD Grant saying, I would also use it from the perspective of it is part of the new evaluation process to help them grow, as Dr. Goree noted. And as we've noted, Dr. Goree is not using it as part of the evaluation process, but we can certainly see how that could work. Joy is saying, I liked how it was laid out. I have found it's difficult to follow up with practice, self-reflection, coaching observations. It's good to see how the analytics can help with that. So once again, we're going to have our third webinar on September the 14th. It is going to be focused on coaching cycle 2. That is a teacher-driven goal. I like to think that our teachers are creating those goals. I'm going to think of them as handoff goals to give to their coaches. They're creating those goals during their self-reflection cycle. And we have some of our objectives posted there for that next webinar. Again, we're hoping that you're going to let us know if you'd like to see a demonstration of the platform. We'll be sharing a recording of this link in addition to a couple of resources as well. I want to thank Justin Bader and the Principal Center for helping to sponsor our webinar today. I want to thank Sydney for helping us as well. Dr. Goree, just thank you so much for taking your time, the time and the effort that you're taking to help other folks understand this such a valuable tool for us to use in our schools.
You are welcome. I wholeheartedly believe in this process. I know that it has impacted instruction in a positive way at my previous campus and at my current campus.
Thank you. So join me in thanking Dr. Goree. And if there are no additional questions, we're going to go ahead and sign off for today's webinar. And we look forward to seeing you in September.